Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Innerviews, where we meet the people behind the businesses and brands in South Africa. And today I'm very excited to be chatting with Nicky Barber. Nicky, please can you tell us a little bit more about your business and why you started it?
Cool. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So I started Delicious Monster in 2017, actually. At the time, I was living in Shanghai. I'd been working for a tech startup called Side Chef. It's a cooking app for 2 years. And I decided to go off on my own and sort of pursue more of a freelance career. It was quite a scary move, but at the time, just felt like the right thing to do. And I continued doing sort of consulting work for my previous employer, so that kept me going. But yeah, I sort of started Delicious Monster, which actually was a food blog to start. So I was director of content at Side Chef, and I was creating food videos and doing recipe development and food photography and general content creation. And that's actually something that I always wanted to do. I come from a media background. I was in media sales for quite a long time. And when I moved to China, it was an opportunity for me to leave a job that I loathed, but was very good at, which was a very strange position to be in. And I went from the sales side to sort of the content creation side and wasn't client facing anymore. So it allowed me to sort of focus on that creative side that I was really desperate to tap into for quite a while. I actually studied to be a chef after school. I didn't get into commercial kitchens, but food has always been at the heart of everything that I've done, and I gravitated to it constantly. So whatever I did, I always sort of kept coming back to food and content creation at a later stage when I got into photography. So I did a digital photography course, started a little food blog called Must Heart Food. And it was, I actually stumbled across a couple of blog posts the other day of it, and I sort of looked back at my writing, my photos, and I was like, oh God, it was very sort of beginner stage. And yeah, so I kind of did that as a hobby. And I think I started that in around 2012, and then sort of grew it from there. And then by 2015, I left my media job and went into the content stuff full time. So that's a little bit of background of how I got into Delicious Monster. And then I left Shanghai and I lived in London for a year, and took a bit of a sort of sabbatical. I was going through quite a lot of personal stuff. I was married at the time, actually, and my relationship ended while I was living in the UK. And I found myself in a really bad place, to be completely honest. I'd lost my sort of confidence. I didn't feel very creative. Everything that I did, if I did manage to create anything, I hated it. It just became, became something that I didn't want to do anymore. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Like I was at a position where everything kind of that I'd been building up fell apart. And I felt like I'd lost my sense of self. I didn't know who I was. I had left behind, prior to leaving South Africa, I had a fantastic career, and I'd built myself up to a place where I was doing really well. And I just kind of felt like everything had just disappeared. So I moved back to South Africa, and I moved back in with my parents after not living at home for a really long time. And I just decided to rebuild my life. And Delicious Monster, even though it kind of took a bit of a backseat, it was always there, and I didn't want to let that go because it was almost the only thing that I had left of my own. So I actually just sort of started consulting again and reached out to the company that I worked for before I left South Africa, and they wanted me on board to do some stuff for them. And I started doing digital project management and social media management and sort of stuff that I knew how to do. And it was, the money was good, and it was kind of a way of me rebuilding. But I felt like I was neglecting Delicious Monster, and I needed to kind of get it to a place where I wanted to be, but I still didn't really know where. And sometimes even now I'm still like, what am I doing? It's not yeah, it changes all the time. And I think that's actually the beauty of what I do, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so last year I sort of built that up and consulted for a few people, did some content creation, got my confidence back. And then I ended off the year really well. And then January started off well. February was great. And then by March, the world ended. Everything just imploded. Like it was a spectacular, within 1 week after the first announcement by Cyril of our lockdown, all my contract work just gone.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was
Decision
once
made
again
for you.
Sorry.
Decision made for you.
Exactly. So it was just, look, there were a lot of tears, and I was just like, I cannot believe this is happening to me again. I'd signed a lease on a cottage in January. I was finally getting my independence back. Things were just 2020, everyone was, I laugh now because it's like 2020, it was the whole like, this year is going to be my year and like it's going to happen. And yeah, within the space of a few days, everything just kind of disappeared. So I had a great consultancy gig. I was going to shoot a recipe book for a cooking school in Johannesburg, which was like my dream job. And so that just all kind of fell away. And I spent a few days deciding how I was going to cope. And how I would make money. And this sounds really woo-woo wah-wah, but I had a dream actually that I published a digital recipe book.
Yes.
And I woke up the next day or after that dream and I was like, that's what I actually need to do. Like I need to just do what I know best, and that's create content, and maybe I can sell it.
Yes.
Let's see. And I had nothing else to do. So I was like, well, let's just do that. So in 3 weeks, I created and published a digital recipe book called The Isolated Kitchen. And I put it together on Canva, which is a great graphic design platform for anyone who is not a graphic designer, because I'm not a graphic designer, but I know a little bit of basic design stuff. So I used Canva and I put it together. I did the recipes, I photographed them myself, I tested them. I wrote them, I wrote intros, I did everything. And then, within 3 weeks, I managed to publish it and start selling it. And then I moved my website from Squarespace to Shopify and built a little online shop. I've sold around sort of 100, 200 copies, which was great, but it was like family and friends and a few people on the outside. But that was kind of like, I used that to build myself up again, I suppose, and get the confidence that I needed to be like, okay, fine, Delicious Monster is what I need to be doing. But the thing is, Delicious Monster is not a one thing, it's various things. So there's the content creation, and I've now got an online shop where I've curated an assortment of things that I love. I use the products that I sell to create content. I use them as ingredients with the things that I make. I've started getting a lot of clients who want me to do product photography for them. I've got a retainer with a client who I do social media content for them, and probably taking on a bigger role now. So within the space of a few months, I've managed to use Delicious Monster as a bit of an incubator, a bit of a guinea pig, and sort of gain traction and gain other clients. Yeah, so that was a long sort of from A to where I am right now. Yeah.
It's a wonderful story because it shows that very often entrepreneurs end up where they don't expect to. I certainly know from my own career path, it wasn't linear. It wasn't a straight line. And also, I love your reflection that along the way you had doubts about whether this was what you needed to do or not.
Huge doubts. I mean, I was away last week, and I was obviously trying not to think about work, because one of the things, and I think a lot of people who have their own businesses will relate, is I struggle to switch off. You know, a lot of people think, oh, you work from home, it's so easy, you have your own business, you're your own boss. But in actual fact, sometimes I'm a little bit envious of people that can go to work and leave, and then that's it. They just like switch off. I don't. I just continue going on. So last week I did switch off for a little bit, but I did, obviously, as the week came to an end and I knew that I would be coming back, you know, to work this week, I started thinking about stuff, and I do have my doubts, and I do wonder, like, what am I doing, and am I doing the right thing, and, you know, chopping and changing. But the beauty is that this is fluid. I don't have to stick with one thing. I can, you know, chop and change. But the one thing is, my quality of my work must always be consistent, and I'm very aware of that, and I would never put anything out there that I am not happy with. So I'm not prepared to what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I'm not prepared to drop my standards in terms of my work. And it's tricky, because also you're sitting in the position where you're not potentially making as much as you need to pay your bills and keep yourself going, and you might find yourself doing stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. And I mean, I think that's par for the course. But you do need to be able to say no to people, because I think a lot of people at the moment, I'm finding, are taking advantage of content creators like myself, thinking, oh, will you just do this for me? You know, I don't have a budget, but like, could you maybe just do this for me and I'll pay you a small amount? And it gets tricky. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm struggling with at the moment.
I think it's quite a common thing for anybody in the artistic field, where anything that really comes from an artistic place is not valued. And people are very quick to say, won't you just, with an implied promise that later something will come of it, and it very seldom does.
Yeah, true.
I think perhaps it's also maybe trickier for you because you've come from a very successful corporate space. I mean, that must have been really tough for you to go from the certainty of a salary and getting money every month in a field that you were good at, to moving into a space of uncertainty, where it becomes more of a struggle.
Yeah, I think, you know, also, you know, in terms of sales positions, there's always commission attached to that. And I was like overshooting my targets by quite a big amount towards the time that I left South Africa. And the commission that I was earning at the time was fantastic. I mean, it was great. I haven't earned that much money since. I mean, I didn't even earn that much money when I was living in China. So, you know, you go from, and I think also you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and you always sort of trying to get more, reach the targets, and people are expecting you to do that. And you've got a sales manager that's asking you, like, where are you at? You know, it's quite intense. And I think that's actually one of the things that I began hating about that job. But yeah, as I said, it was such a strange place to be in, because I was good at it, and my clients loved me, and I loved interacting with people, and you know, the relationships that were a part of that. But it was the targets and the trying to fight for people's budgets, and just, yeah, it just became a little bit too much. But the money was great, and the stability was fantastic, and it was safe. And now it's not safe. I mean, now it's like, now you can literally lose all your work in a week.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And I think the position that a lot of us find ourselves in now, no matter what industry you're in, is that everyone's cut back, and it's become really competitive. I mean, I belong to a few forums on Facebook and resource groups and all that sort of thing, and people are looking for work, or people are looking to hire people, and it's just like, it's insane. There are so many people looking for jobs. So yeah.
I do, the older I get, believe that being an entrepreneur is actually about engineering a life you enjoy. It's not just about making money. It's about engineering, you know, what we like to do, what we don't like to do, and creating a day that we can live with. That when we go to bed at night, it's not we don't feel like it was awful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about, being my own boss, is that I do have that freedom. Look, I don't think that this is relevant for a lot of us, is that I don't sort of slack off during the day, or, I might start work between 9 and 10, but I'm going to be working until 5 or 6 and potentially after that. And I do put in some hours over the weekend, but I think I appreciate my time a lot more, and I do like being in charge of it. The one thing is I need to just learn to switch off. Like switching off, and I mean like turning off your phone.
Yes. So
and not looking at everything, yeah.
I can totally relate to that, because I had a very, very similar challenge, and it's taken me 25 years to learn that these days what I actually do is I switch off both my phone and my laptop at the same time in the evenings. I put them in a box.
Oh, wow.
In another room. In another building. And walk away from them. And it might sound crazy, but the kind of that physical action of putting it in a box, shutting the lid, walking away, shutting the door. And then when I go into the cottage where we live, I'm able to disconnect completely and say, okay, now I'm here to spend time with Pete. I don't know if the strategy will work for you. And for some people, if you've got kids and stuff like that, you can't always switch off your phone. But that's been a strategy that has worked for me. But as I say, it's taken me 25 years to learn to actually implement it for myself.
Yeah, I've actually started watching my screen time over the weeks and get that notification on a Sunday, and I sort of cower my head in shame if it's gone up by, like, the 1 week it was like, your screen time's gone up by 35%. I was like, oh my God. But it's funny, I can sort of tell by the kind of weeks that I have how much time I spend on my phone. But the thing is that unfortunately or fortunately, the work that I do does actually require me to be on my phone and in front of my computer a lot. And like social media, for example, it's another thing that I love social media, and I think it's a fantastic tool, but I also really dislike it. And if I could, I would delete it all, but I can't, because I could never do what I'm doing without it.
Yes.
And yeah, I just think, unfortunately, it's part of my job. I have to be, but I think it's also, I think you need to develop a healthy relationship with those platforms. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, I think.
Well, I'd like to go down there. What do you feel is the dark side of social media? Because I know a lot of people. Okay.
Yeah, I think, there's that saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that is a huge part of content creators and, I'll say influencers. I don't consider myself an influencer, but I know that the stuff that I do post online does, help with people making decisions about things. But I think there's a lot of comparison. Just the other day I was looking at someone that I follow, and she was talking about all her new clients, and there was this part of me that was like, oh, like I wish I had lots of new clients. And then I was like, no, stop. This is ridiculous. And this is the beast of things like Instagram, especially. And it's that scrolling and sort of like seeing things and thinking, oh, I should be doing that, or why is what I'm doing not getting that sort of engagement, or how come they're doing so well, or I think it's a big part, and I think it's horrible. It's a horrible part of social media, and there's that comparison. It's a big problem, actually. But the thing is, there's also perception. I think that it's very easy to pretend that your life is different to what it actually is on social media.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think people need to always keep that in the back of their minds when they're looking at stuff. And I've learned to do that.
Yes.
And I think it helps quite a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I often speak to entrepreneurs who are fearful of getting into the social media space. And I remind them that the really personal parts of my life and the really good stuff and the really bad stuff never ever makes it onto social media. You know,
Yeah.
there's some of it that you have to keep to yourself.
No, you do, definitely. I think, I think that there's definitely strength in being like, especially for bloggers who, write about their lives, and they show a side of, vulnerability. And I think that there's something quite powerful in that, because it's kind of dropping that facade of having your life together and actually being like, this is who I am. And I'm comfortable to a point with doing that. But yes, I think that there is a part of your life that doesn't all have to be online. It's nice to keep some sort of stuff sacred and sort of quiet. Yeah.
How do you create personal boundaries for the social network space?
To be honest with you, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't find that a lot of people disrespect my boundaries in the social. If you're including WhatsApp in that, that's a big problem.
Okay, what are your challenges with WhatsApp?
Okay, so there's an always on approach that people just seem to have. And I started realizing this when I was living in China, when I was getting voice notes from people at 2:00 in the morning on WeChat, and waking up in the morning and finding group chats had been running like throughout the night, and thinking, my God, do people not sleep? Like, I don't understand what's going on here. And it was this always on approach. And I think it has infiltrated into a lot of other things. And I think now a lot of people will WhatsApp you at like 9:00 at night. Look, a lot of people do it and they say, you don't have to respond to me now, but just FYI. And I get that, because I also sometimes am sitting on the couch watching TV, and suddenly something will pop into my head and I think, I must message this person. I probably shouldn't. I should wait for the next morning. But there are cases where that happens. But I think it's the messaging people after hours, expecting them to do stuff for you. It's just, I think because there's that automatic, like, your WhatsApp's there, Facebook and Instagram are there, you can instantly message people. But I think there's kind of a bit of a, there's an idea of like, if I can instantly message you, you should instantly reply to me.
Yes.
And I think that's like, I think it's a huge problem, actually.
I've definitely had challenges with that, and that's one of the boundaries I've created for myself. If somebody expects me to respond immediately, then I remove them from my network, because I don't have capacity to respond, and sometimes I'm not fit for human consumption.
No, exactly. Like, you can begin feeling like everyone wants a piece of you, depending on what you're doing.
Yes.
But luckily on Facebook and Instagram, which are the two main platforms that I use, I'm lucky in that regard. I know that there are a lot of people that struggle with people asking questions about stuff and being quite rude, actually, like, just not, I think, like, yeah, people will message you and say, well, not me, because I've never experienced this, but it's like, where can I get this? There's just like this, you're not speaking to a robot, you're speaking to, there's actually a person behind that account. There's somebody who's putting a lot of time and effort into creating stuff and selling stuff. And, I think that's the thing, like, you're behind a screen, so you can forget that there are human people, like, with feelings on the other side. And I think that's also another thing with people who start getting abused on social media. But touch wood, luckily I don't experience that sort of stuff. If I did, I would block them, and I wouldn't even, I wouldn't give it more energy than that.
Yeah, I wasn't very clear on my boundaries for a long time, and I let everybody in. And I created a group that got to, well, it's at 66,000 members now. And
oh my God.
When we got to around 50,000 members, some of the abuse started coming in. And because I had no systems in place, there was a rough 6 months where I had to very quickly understand what boundaries look like and how to implement them.
Yeah, and I think not taking things personally, which is hard, especially if like something's yours, you know. Yeah, I don't know. There are just a lot of people out there that I sort of see. I mean, I sort of see comments on things that I follow, and I think, I don't know what these people think. Like, it's not okay to speak to people like that. It's not okay to treat people like that. Even like today, I saw something on a resource group, and someone posted a portfolio of theirs. They're doing web design stuff, and she had a typo in it. And someone commented and said, "I think you mean this," like correcting them. Like, it's not necessary. You don't have to say that. You know, it's
Public
don't try.
embarrassment.
Exactly. Don't go out of your way to like embarrass people or make them feel inadequate, or because I think we're all dealing with our own things. We're all trying really hard at moments, especially. This year's been really tough. So I think just kind of, yeah, just remember that there are humans on the other side.
Absolutely. Now, I love the name of your business. Delicious Monster, to me,
Yeah.
sounds absolutely delicious. How did you come up with that name?
To be honest with you, I love the plant.
Okay.
So that's where it came from.
Okay.
I had a delicious monster ring that I got as a gift from a jeweler in Cape Town called Dear Rare. And it just kind of came from there. Yeah. And I haven't been very good at keeping delicious monsters alive, although in the last year it's improved. But yeah, no, I love the plant. So that's where it came from. But I think it also has different meaning. Like it's delicious, as in like it's amazing, but it's also a bit of a monster. There's a kind of a bit of it's like my life, actually. Like, it's great, but also there are parts of it that are insanely difficult, or
Yes.
it's like the good and the bad, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, it sounds like a name that you can really like take to the finish line.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
great.
No, thank you. I'm happy. I mean, as I said earlier, my first blog was Must Heart Food. I don't know where I came up with that from, but yeah, anyway, and then I kind of changed it. And then when I moved to Shanghai, I started another blog called Lotuses and Lane Houses, which was basically about life in China. And I started writing a lot about that. And it was some fun content, because moving from South Africa to a country like China was insane.
Yes.
And then, yeah, I kind of changed it to Delicious Monster, because I realized that I probably wouldn't be living in China for the rest of my life. And I wanted something a little bit more broad. And yeah, so I kind of thought about it for a little while and then came up with Delicious Monster, but it's a good name. I think whatever I do, I think it's the kind of name that if I change tact a little bit, it could still work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I have to agree there. And as a South African who's gone away and come back, what made you come home?
Well, I mean, I didn't really have much going on in London. And as I said, like, my life really fell apart. So I had to come back home to the safety, I suppose, of my family. And coming back to South Africa was quite a challenge. I still miss certain things. Being able to walk home at night in Shanghai after being out with friends and walking home on my own at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, not worrying about my safety, was great. Public transport was amazing. I loved taking the bus in London and Shanghai. Actually, I felt like the metro and the subway and or the tube and the subway, I didn't like being underground and not sort of seeing my surroundings. So I really preferred the slow bus rides, and I miss that. So I just think there's certain safety and convenience things.
Yes.
Yeah, I miss that. And look, I always say, you know, if I lived in Shanghai, I can live anywhere. So I'm not anchored to South Africa. If I end up moving overseas again, that's fine. And I think that's actually one of the big motivators for Delicious Monster is I want it to be something that wherever I live, I can do. It's, so, in a year's time, I might not be living in South Africa anymore. And I probably will have to, I will have to stop selling tangible items because I won't be able to do that myself, but I can always do the digital stuff. And I can consult for clients, and it's a very sort of, I can be wherever. And I think that's a huge thing for me. Like I have to keep that going because I don't want it to be, I don't want it to tie me down. I want it to be something I can take with me.
It's a wonderful new way of modeling businesses. I myself I spent about 10 years re-engineering and remodeling my business so that I could work from anywhere. And it really is a lovely thing when you can just pick up and go anywhere you want to and continue to do what you love to do.
Exactly, because I think, that's the one thing I learned about moving overseas is that I couldn't continue doing what I was doing, even though I didn't want to. You kind of pigeonhole yourself, and I don't want to ever be in the position where that happens again. So, yeah.
So, what sorts of products does Delicious Monster sell?
So I sell for a few people. I've got a really stunning jam called Nastergal. It's a preserve, and it's made from Nastergal berries, called Heerlijk Nastergal, and that was the first one that I sort of started selling. And then I sell granola, and I've got some rooibos teas. I've got some chocolate. It's sort of edible stuff. I'm still tweaking that. I also started producing my own products. So I'd make a granola butter, which is like a nut butter and granola spread. And then I also make a seed mix called Everything Bagel seed mix. So I've sort of started looking at my own things. I think, with my mom always told me when I was growing up, because she was a chef and she had her own restaurant. She said to me, Nicky, if you ever want to make money, don't go into food.
And you didn't listen.
Didn't listen. No, look, food is something that I think you've got to have a lot of passion for, but the margins are so small.
Yes.
And I think in terms of ingredients, you've got to source good ingredients. You've got to find good pricing. There's really a lot of work that goes into it. So I've started sort of doing my own things because the margins are higher. But I mean, I have spreadsheets and I put all sorts of costings in there and I see what my yield is. And I sort of, the other day I was doing, just before I went away, I did a batch of granola butter and I was sort of fiddling with the numbers and figuring out a few things and looking at my cost price. And, you factor in the jar and the label and all that stuff. And then I saw my profit of what I would potentially earn if I sold, all of it. And I thought, I've stood here for 2 hours for very little money. And I'm like, I had one of those moments where I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is crazy. Why am I doing this? But yeah, so I kind of do that sort of thing. But I'm looking at some new products. I'm thinking about my own stuff. But as I said, like, it's so fluid, like it can chop and change. I'm probably going to delist a few things because they're not moving. I also find there's, it's quite competitive. I think if, for example, a big retailer like Pick n Pay lists something that you're selling, they squeeze you for price. They'll get the supply down as far as possible, and then they can sell it for less than what you can sell it for. And then it becomes, why would I compete with Pick n Pay? Like, why would I? It doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of people who are creating their own food products as well they sort of go in and they start off not putting the right pricing in place. So I found that there's some discrepancies between like wholesale pricing and retail pricing. And then some people are selling directly to the public at the wholesale price. And it totally messes the market up. So yeah, you've got to just be very careful of those sort of things.
Mm.
So I'm learning a lot.
Well, I think you're ahead of a lot of people because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who don't dig into their numbers in the way that you clearly are. And they can really be an advantage for you because you know when it's worth doing and when it's not, and you know when you're really running at a loss.
Yeah,
That kind of thing. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who don't even realize that those small margins are causing them to run at a loss when they factor in absolutely everything that they have to.
absolutely. And I think also the one thing I found is like courier charges, for example. You know, a lot of people are making losses on that. They are absorbing delivery fees so that they, you know, the customer sees a lower fee and they'll be more inclined to order. But in fact, they need to, you know, factor in that chunk on there. It's a minefield. I mean, you really have to be very careful that you don't end up running a loss because, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. I mean, even with getting labels printed, you know, you do the design, you go back and forth, you make changes, you get proofs. The proof comes, it's wrong. You know, it's not easy. And I think a lot of people who don't operate in the space look at somebody like me and what I'm doing, and they're like, "Oh, it seems so glamorous." It's not glamorous. It's really hard. Like, that's why some days I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. This is too much.
So on those days when you feel like that, what makes you go back?
I think my drive and my passion for things, and also like not wanting to give up, you know. I think that's what it is. But you know, there does come a time when you have to be like, this needs to stop. You need to be able to. I think the person that I have, going back to your boundary question, I think the person that I have the biggest issues with boundaries is myself. Yeah.
That's great insight. Thank you so much for sharing such valuable nuggets of learning for the people who are watching.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your vulnerability and just your honesty about the process have been really refreshing. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So if anybody would like to find you online, how can they connect with you?
So they can go to my website. It's mydeliciousmonster.com. And then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'll ask you to put the handles into the description below this video. And you can email me if you're needing help with your product photography or want to bounce some ideas off me. I'm always happy to help with that. And you can email me, and that's at Nicky, it's NICKY @mydeliciousmonster.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Nicky. It was really wonderful
Thanks so
talking
much.
to you.
My pleasure. Yeah, it was great. Thank you.